Um, what if I told you that every time you get up to, say, walk to the fridge, you aren't actually using your muscles to push yourself forward?
I mean, it sounds totally backwards, right?
Completely backwards.
Yeah.
But you were basically just falling over and then, using your leg to catch yourself at the absolute last second over and over again.
Right. It's a highly efficient game of chicken with gravity.
Yeah, you really aren't, like, powering your way through space.
No, not at all. It is a completely counterintuitive way to think about our own bodies because we are so used to the idea of movement as this top-down command and control system.
Oh, for sure. You think, hey, I want to move, your brain fires an electrical signal, your muscles contract, and off you go.
Exactly. We view ourselves sort of like cars, right?
Okay.
The brain presses the gas pedal, the engine revs up, and the wheels spin.
Right. It feels super linear.
Yeah.
But then you start peeling back the layers of what is actually happening biomechanically. And that linear push-button machine model, it just shatters completely.
It really does.
We are looking at a landscape of movement today that is an absolute masterpiece of hidden engineering. So, welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. We are exploring a curated stack of research today featuring cutting-edge insights pulled directly from the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, and the journal Science from the AAASS.
And the reason this specific research is so profound is that it basically forces us to strip away all of our daily assumptions about, what it means to exist in a moving body.
Yes, exactly. The mission for today's deep dive is to fundamentally change how you listening to this right now, experience your own everyday movements.
Because it is happening every single time you take a step.
Every single time. We're going to discover that moving, whether you are walking down the street, swimming laps in a pool, or just like watching a bird fly overhead, it isn't just a brute force physical act.
No, it's a wildly efficient universal system of energy recycling.
Right. We're going to dig into the secret physics that keep you from collapsing from exhaustion every time you try to get from point A to point B.
Because locomotion is a universal principle. That is the foundational concept we really need to anchor ourselves to today.
A universal principle. I love it.
Yeah, whether we are analyzing human beings on a sidewalk or any other moving species on Earth, the underlying physics and the biological strategies for moving through space connect all of us.
So it's not just a human thing.
Not at all. It is not about whether you have 2 legs, 4 legs, fins, or wings. It is about a shared biological blueprint for extreme efficiency.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can understand the mechanics of how we walk or run, the sources insist that we have to redefine the basic definition of movement itself.
Right, we have to start from scratch.
Yeah. The NIH text points out that we need what they call an integrative view of animal movement.
The integrative view.
Right. It argues that locomotion is not just a localized physical action. It is a highly complex system where biomechanics, neural control, and environmental interactions all function together as a collective whole. So I want to make sure I am grasping the sheer scale of this. You are telling me it's not just my brain sending a one-way text message to my leg.
Definitely not a one-way message.
It is an active, real-time negotiation between my nervous system, my physical biology, and the actual physical ground I'm standing on.
That is precisely what this research demonstrates. Let's really break down that phrase, collective whole.
Okay, let's show it.
When you take a single step, your neural control, so your brain and your nerve network, is absolutely firing off signals.
Right. The brain is doing its part.
Exactly. And your biomechanics, your bones, your muscles, your tendons, they are executing the structural shift. But the environment itself is the third equally vital partner in that triad.
The environment, meaning like the dirt or the concrete.
Yes, the firmness of the dirt, the gravitational pull of the earth, the friction under your shoe. Your body is in a constant dynamic negotiation with all of those external forces in real time.
Wait, so the ground isn't just a passive stage?
Not at all. If you remove the environment, or if the environment acts unpredictably, the entire system fails.
Wow. So it is essentially a three-way partnership, your brain, your body, and the planet itself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, understanding this integrative view completely overhauls the traditional paradigm of biology.
How so?
Well, we have to stop seeing an animal as an isolated object moving through an empty void and start seeing locomotion as a continuous physical interaction with the environment.
Oh, I see. It's an interaction, not just an action.
Exactly. And why this matters so deeply is that this complex system relies on universal principles that apply exactly the same way across entirely different species.
Even species that look nothing alike.
Absolutely. The NIH highlights that it doesn't matter if an animal is walking, swimming, or flying. Every single one of them is engaging their biomechanics, their neural control, and their specific environment as one collective whole.
That is incredible. But that brings us to, I guess, the most practical question. How does this collective whole operate without instantly draining our batteries?
That is the big mystery, isn't it?
Right. Because if movement is this heavy, constant negotiation with gravity and friction, how do our bodies optimize that interaction? Why aren't we just completely exhausted after a 5-minute walk?
And that leads us directly to energy exchange mechanisms.
Yes. The text points us toward these mechanisms. Let's start with the most common movement for you listening right now, which is walking. The source describes the core physics of walking as the inverted pendulum.
The inverted pendulum. I know it sounds like a complex piece of clockwork.
It really does.
But it is actually the evolutionary secret to why humans can track across miles of terrain without their muscles completely giving out.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the text says that when we walk, the body vaults over a stiff leg, exchanging kinetic energy for gravitational potential energy.
Right, a stiff leg.
Now, you know how a grandfather clock's pendulum works? It anchors at the top, and the heavy brass weight swings back and forth at the bottom.
Yeah, a classic pendulum.
The text suggests we just flip that completely upside down. Every single time you take a step, the foot that hits the ground becomes the anchor point.
Exactly.
Your leg bones form the stiff rod of the pendulum, and your center of mass, your torso and head, acts as the heavy weight at the very top.
It is such a brilliant visual.
You are literally vaulting your mass over your own stiff leg, trading the energy of your forward momentum for the energy of gravity.
It is an incredibly elegant piece of physics. Let's really look at the why of this specific mechanism.
Yeah, why do we do it this way?
Why do we lock our leg to vault over it? It is purely an energy optimization strategy. Let's analyze those two types of energy you just mentioned. Kinetic energy and gravitational potential energy.
Okay, kinetic and potential.
Kinetic energy is the energy of your forward horizontal motion. When your heel strikes the sidewalk and you begin to vault up and over that stiff leg, you are naturally slowing your forward motion down slightly. You are bleeding off kinetic energy.
Right, because you are physically climbing up over your own leg. You are basically fighting gravity for a split second to raise your center of mass.
Exactly. You are climbing. But in the physics of a pendulum, that energy doesn't disappear.
Where does it go?
As your torso rises to the highest point of your step, that exact microsecond when your leg is perfectly vertical under you, your kinetic energy has been transformed entirely into gravitational potential energy.
Oh, wow.
You have literally stored the energy of your forward movement simply by lifting yourself up against gravity.
So gravity is holding on to the energy for a second.
Right. Then, as your body naturally tips and falls forward into the next step, that stored gravitational potential energy is converted right back into kinetic energy, speeding you up as you descend.
Up and down, kinetic to potential, potential back to kinetic.
Endlessly repeating.
So it's a trade. You are basically swapping energies back and forth to keep the engine running.
That is the perfect way to describe it.
But wait, if walking is this perfect, almost free trade of gravity and momentum, why do I get so incredibly tired walking uphill? Doesn't this inverted pendulum model completely fail the second the ground isn't perfectly flat?
That is a fantastic point, and it cuts right to the heart of why the environment is the third partner in the collective whole.
Ah, the environment steps in.
Yes, the inverted pendulum is highly efficient on flat ground because the energy swap is perfectly balanced, but the moment you introduce an incline, the environment has changed the terms of the negotiation.
So the deal changes.
Right. Now, you aren't just vaulting over your leg to maintain your height. You have to generate extra kinetic energy with your muscles to push your center of mass higher up the hill than it was on the previous step.
Which is hard work.
Very hard work. The trade is no longer even. You are paying a biological tax to the hill, which is exactly why your muscles start burning.
Oh, a hill tax. That makes so much sense. My muscles literally have to make up the difference when gravity starts charging more for the trade.
Exactly. You have to pay the tax.
But on flat ground, I am a walking metronome, endlessly exchanging energies to minimize the caloric cost of getting to the kitchen.
A very efficient metronome.
But here's the thing about a pendulum. It has a set rhythm. It relies on a relatively slow, methodical transfer of weight. So what happens when you are, say, late for the train?
Everything changes.
The moment you break into a run, you aren't walking stiff-legged anymore. The pendulum model has to break down, right? Because you can't just swing a stiff rod faster and faster.
You are absolutely right. It breaks down completely. The text from science transitions us entirely out of the physics of walking and introduces a completely different mechanism for running.
Okay, what is it?
It is called the spring mass model.
So what does this all mean? Because the source states that during running, the leg stops acting like a pendulum and starts acting like a spring.
Yes, a literal spring.
The specific analogy they provide is a pogo stick. Are we saying our anatomy literally mimics a biological pogo stick?
Biomechanically, yes. When you run, you completely abandon the stiff leg.
Right, you have to.
Your knees bend deeply, your ankles flex. You are quite literally bouncing your mass through space.
Bouncing, not vaulting.
Exactly. But the crucial aspect of the spring mass model, the mechanic that makes running sustainable rather than exhausting us in 30 seconds, happens during what the text identifies as the braking phase.
The braking phase.
Yeah.
Which honestly on its face sounds completely absurd.
It does seem counterproductive.
Right. If I am sprinting, the absolute last thing I want to do is brake. Why would my body actively try to slow me down when I am trying to maximize speed?
What's fascinating here is the sheer biological genius of this exact phase.
Genius. How so?
Well, when your foot strikes the ground during a run, your body does experience a fraction of a second of deceleration. That is the braking phase.
Okay, I feel that impact when I run.
But just like with the walking pendulum, the energy of your forward momentum isn't just lost to the ether. Instead of trading it for height and gravity, your body actively absorbs and stores it as elastic energy.
Elastic energy.
Yes, and the physical structures that absorb it are your tendons and ligaments.
Ah, so slowing down isn't a flaw in the design.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually a necessary feature.
It is the defining feature. The braking phase is the exact moment your body is loading up its physical hardware.
Loading it up.
Right. Your tendons, like the Achilles tendon at the back of your heel, stretch out under the massive force of your impact.
Wow.
They act identically to the heavy coiled springs inside a pogo stick. They soak up the massive kinetic shock of your foot striking the ground.
So they stretch out like rubber bands.
Exactly. And then, as you roll forward and push off for your next stride, those heavily stretched tendons snap back to their original resting shape, releasing all of that stored elastic energy to powerfully slingshot your body forward.
Slingshotting, that makes so much intuitive sense.
It feels great when you hit that rhythm.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
If you have ever felt that incredible rhythm on a good run, you aren't just muscling your way off the pavement with raw thigh strength. You are recycling the heavy impact of your previous step.
You are recycling your own shock waves.
You hit the ground, compress the biological spring in your ankle and knee, and boom, you are propelled into the next bound.
Right. Boom, right into the next step.
But, this also perfectly explains why running on different surfaces feels so drastically different.
Absolutely. The environment again.
Right. If the environment is the third partner, then running on soft sand must be exhausting because the sand shifts. It steals the energy before your tendon can compress.
Exactly. When you run on concrete, the environment provides a completely rigid surface for your biological spring to compress against.
Concrete pushes back.
It does. But on dry sand, the ground gives way. The sand absorbs the kinetic energy instead of your tendon, meaning your spring never gets fully loaded.
Oh, so the slingshot is broken.
You lose the slingshot effect entirely, and suddenly your muscles have to do 100% of the work.
Which is brutal.
It perfectly illustrates the collective whole concept. Without the right environmental interaction, the internal biomechanics cannot do their job efficiently.
Okay, so walking is trading energy with gravity. Running is storing energy in your own biological rubber bands. It is brilliant.
Biology is amazing.
It really is. But both of those systems, the inverted pendulum and the spring mass model, they share one massive dependency.
Yes, they do.
They absolutely require a solid surface. They need the ground to provide resistance so we can vault or bounce. Which brings us to a massive, mind-bending complication in this deep dive.
This is where things get strange.
Seriously, how on earth do animals optimize movement when there's no ground to push against?
It sounds like a biomechanical paradox, doesn't it?
Completely.
If locomotion is an integrated system that fundamentally relies on pushing against the environment, What do you do when your environment is water or empty sky?
Right, because these fluids just displace and move out of your way the moment you apply force to them.
Exactly. The yield.
Like, if I take a literal pogo stick to the deep end of a swimming pool and try to jump, I'm just going to sink straight to the bottom.
You were going nowhere.
There is nothing solid to compress the spring against. Yet the text from science reveals that animals that swim and fly actually utilize the exact same universal principles of energy storage.
The exact same principle.
They are still highly optimized, they still recycle their physical effort. But the mechanism they use to do it sounds like pure science fiction.
It is a masterclass in fluid dynamics. Because swimmers and flyers lack a rigid surface to push against, they cannot easily store elastic energy in their own internal tendons the way a runner on a sidewalk does.
Because there's no shock to absorb.
Yes, right. There is no hard impact. Instead, the text states that they store this energy externally.
Externally.
Yes. They store it in the vortex rings of the fluid wakes they create behind them.
Okay, wait. I need you to really clarify this for me, because this is wild. Are we saying an animal swimming in the ocean or a bird flying in the sky is literally leaving behind invisible spinning rings of energy in the water or the air?
Yes.
And using those rings to propel themselves?
That is exactly what has happened.
That is insane.
To visualize a vortex ring, think of a classic smoke ring, but made entirely of water or air, spinning internally with incredible velocity.
Like a fast-spinning donut.
Exactly. When a fish strokes its fin or a bird aggressively flaps its wing, it isn't just randomly shoving fluid backward.
It's not just splashing around.
No, the specific shape and motion of the fin or wing actually manipulates the fluid to roll back on itself, creating a highly structured spinning donut of fluid, a vortex ring.
But how does a spinning donut of water actually help them move forward? Water is still just water, isn't it?
Well, have you ever cupped your hand in a swimming pool and pulled it sharply toward your chest?
Oh yeah, like when you're treading water.
You feel that heavy ball of water momentarily resist your hand before slipping away?
Yeah, it feels heavy for a second.
That resistance exists because it takes a fraction of a second for the fluid to move out of your way. What the animal is doing is creating a highly structured, self-stabilizing version of that heavy ball of water.
Okay, I'm tracking.
Because the water or air inside that vortex ring is spinning so fast, it forms a coherent boundary. For a brief, critical moment, that spinning ring acts like a solid physical object.
Ah, so the animal kicks the water curls into a tight spinning ring, and before the ring can fall apart, the animal actually uses it as a physical foothold to push off of.
Precisely. The animal is manufacturing its own temporary solid ground out of thin air or liquid water.
Manufacturing ground. That is unbelievable.
It leaves a continuous chain of these spinning, energetic rings in its wake, essentially building a staircase of external spring mass mechanisms to push against.
This raises an important question, though. If a bird or a fish is physically building its own temporary ground out of spinning fluid, how does that change our definition of where the animal ends and the outside world begins?
It completely dissolves the boundary.
It has to, right?
And this brings us full circle back to the very first section of our deep dive, the integrative view.
Right, the brain-body-environment thing.
The realization that movement is a complex system of biomechanics, neural control, and environment functioning as a collective whole.
It all clicks together now.
When a flyer or a swimmer is purposefully storing its kinetic energy externally in a vortex ring, the environment itself has quite literally become a functional piece of the animal's physical machinery.
Wow.
The air or the water is acting as the animal's external tendons.
That is just, it really reframes how you look at nature. The environment isn't just a backdrop you move past. It is the very machinery you are actively using to move.
It is the ultimate manifestation of environmental interaction.
A true partnership.
Yes. The internal body and the external fluid are working so harmoniously together, exchanging energy in such a perfectly choreographed sequence that distinguishing between the animal's effort and the environment's response becomes almost impossible.
So let's bring this all together for you listening. We started this deep dive talking about the seemingly simple act of standing up and walking across the room. We assumed it was just a brain barking an order at a muscle.
A simple command.
But now we look at the reality of the physics. Whether you are vaulting over your stiff leg on your walk to work, smoothly trading your horizontal momentum for a brief moment of gravity like an upside-down pendulum,
Right.
or you are bouncing down the sidewalk on a morning jog, heavily loading your tendons with elastic energy during the braking phase?
Loading the springs.
Or you were watching a bird leave a wake of invisible, spinning vortex rings in the sky. Every single movement is a masterpiece of energy exchange.
It really is a masterpiece.
You aren't just moving, you are actively optimizing universal physics. You are an integral part of a collective whole.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating and somewhat provocative paradox to consider.
Ooh, what is it?
If our biological tendons, our gravitational pendulum mechanics, and these fluid vortex rings have evolved to recycle movement energy with such absolute perfect efficiency,
Yeah.
what happens when we try to build robots or synthetic machines to replicate human or animal movement?
Oh, that's a great point.
Can rigid metal limbs and standard electric motors ever truly replicate the elegant, energy-saving bounce of a biological tendon?
I wonder.
Or are machines fundamentally disadvantaged because they are missing out on this highly evolved, perfectly integrated collective whole?
A brilliant question to leave you with. Can steel ever truly learn to bounce like biology? Next time you take a step, I want you to feel the gravity, notice the vault, feel the spring in your ankle.
Pay attention to the mechanics.
Thank you so much for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive into the hidden physics of animal locomotion. Stay curious, keep moving, and we will catch you on the next deep dive. Remember, you aren't just walking, you are a living, breathing, inverted pendulum.